The first 4 accidents I'm going to discuss all occurred in Lear 35As like this one. I operated Lear 35s as a captain for many years. The Lear 35 is a very demanding and unforgiving jet aircraft. When the aircraft was certified, it came with 7 different wings, including Century 3, Soft Flight, and Mark 4, because the builders couldn't decide which wing was best. But the most alarming statistic by far are the sheer number of experienced Learjet pilots who have been killed in Learjets for operating the aircraft outside normal parameters. The first accident occurred in San Diego several years ago, and it was nationwide news. After the pilots flew over the airport, they started maneuvering too close to it to not lose sight of it and experienced an accelerated stall. What you may not know is that the tower allowed the pilots to cancel their IFR flight plan when the weather had actually gone down to IFR conditions. Did you notice how low the clouds really were in that last video clip? The pilots were maneuvering when it was less than 3 miles visibility. The visibility was actually just 2.5 miles, and they were also only flying at half the altitude they should have been of 1,440 feet. Would the difference in visibilities have made any difference in this accident? I don't think so. In Learjet pilot training, we are taught to never exceed medium bank turns at low altitude and at slow speeds for obvious reasons, but these pilots are continuing to do it to not lose sight of the airports. This second accident involved a Lear 35A as well into Truckee. The weather conditions were marginal again with low clouds and low visibilities, and as a result, the pilots maneuvered too close to the airport. This accident really hits close to home for me because several years earlier, while I was operating Lear 35s, I had an opportunity to fly passengers from Dallas into Truckee during similar marginal weather conditions. Now back then, there was only an instrument approach into the shorter runway, and I would have had to circle just like these pilots tried to. And I looked at the weather and I told myself, there's no way I'm going to attempt to do that. So I flew the passengers to Reno instead. This third accident involved a Lear 35 as well in the Chicago area. Moderate icing was forecast in the area, and the pilots had seen and knew that their aircraft had ice on it. They were even experiencing unusual control difficulties, but they did not put 2 and 2 together and fly faster, and they stalled. The fourth accident occurred in a Lear 35A as well, and although marginal weather was not a factor, the criticality of performing these maneuvers the way you're trained is crucial. I am not even going to begin to list all the different things that went wrong with this flight. Aircraft have maneuvering limitations for a reason, and Learjet is no different than any other aircraft. The limitations must be respected, particularly at low altitudes. If you choose to not respect the maneuvering limitations as you were trained in flight school, then you will have to pay the consequences, and that's exactly what happened here. The fifth and final accident I'm going to discuss occurred in a Challenger 605 up in Truckee, California. Just a couple years ago, it became national news. There were forest fires that were occurring in the area, and as a result, the visibility was marginal at best. And as a result, there were a lot of mistakes made in this flight, and you can read the accident report sometime if you'd like. But you've heard it all before. Due to the reduced visibility, the pilots maneuvered the aircraft too close to the airport, thereby setting themselves up for failure. Truckee is a high-altitude airport surrounded by mountains, and when the weather conditions are not the best, you can only approach it from the north or from the west. Although the pilots had already set up the approach for the much longer runway, aircraft were arriving to the much shorter runway, and they followed suit, in my opinion, because they did not want to accept any delays. The aircraft's actual and optimal flight paths are shown. But the most tragic thing of all was that, unlike the other accidents, these pilots had a choice to arrive from a completely different direction. Followed suit, in my opinion, because they did not want to accept any delays. You may be asking yourself, why didn't the pilots just execute a go-around if the approach was so unstable? Continuation bias likely played a role, and that's where the desire to complete the mission takes precedence over everything else. Here I am doing some 777 training. The biggest disadvantage small jet operators have with practicing circling approaches is they practice them primarily at the same airports. For me, that was JFK. After a while, we would use certain landmarks and be able to conduct the maneuvers perfectly, even in the most marginal weather conditions. But I want to make a confession. I told myself more than once while doing the maneuvers that if I wasn't in a simulator in such terrible conditions, I would never be operating an aircraft in such conditions in the real world. One of the biggest advantages airline pilots have is the vastly reduced risk they enjoy by operating into such large airports with excellent approaches regardless of the direction they're coming from. However, smaller jet operators operating at airline speeds into smaller airports don't have those advantages.